So feel free to follow us on Instagram at Pursuing ESQ. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce the founder of Pursuing the Esquire, Danielle Hardy, who will be moderating tonight's panel.
Thank you so much, Tunde. And again, thank you all for joining us. I am extremely excited to welcome you to our panel series that kicks off tonight with these incredible attorneys who will be sharing their paths to becoming attorneys as well as what they currently practice in our legal profession. So my name again is Danielle Hardy. I am a practicing New York-based entertainment attorney at Universal Music Group, which is the #1 record label in the world. I, as well as my team, are all practicing attorneys in various states on the East Coast. And we are excited to share with you tonight as well as in our upcoming panels. So stay tuned, you will hear from us as well in the future. And I will begin with introducing our incredible panelists for tonight. Our first panelist is Ashley Ward. Ashley comes from a military family. She received her bachelor's in political science from Francis Marion University in Florence, South Carolina. She received her Juris Doctor degree from Charlotte School of Law in Charlotte, North Carolina. And she was the first judicial law clerk for the Honorable Doneen Carrington Martin, the first Black female judge for the Circuit Court of Charles County, Maryland. She is currently an assistant state's attorney for Prince George's County, Maryland, where she handles criminal matters for their Special Victims Unit and their Family Violence Unit. She's the youngest president for the Southern Maryland Women's Bar and is a member of the renowned Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. When she has free time, Ashley loves to find the perfect book for her book club, Bees Book Club, and searching for the next brunch spot. So thank you so much, Ashley, and welcome.
Thank you, Danielle.
Our next panelist is Celeste Vondin. She has over 20 years of experience in practicing law, including serving as a commercial transactional attorney to several Fortune 500 and 100 companies, and as an executive president and chief legal counsel to the former technology arm of the largest nonprofit corporation in the US. She currently serves as Ecosystems Counsel, handling strategic partnerships for Accenture LLP. Ms. Vondin is a native of Michigan and possesses a Bachelor's of Arts in Russian and East European Studies from the University of Michigan. She received her Juris Doctor from George Washington University Law School, and she's currently practiced and admitted to practice in the District of Columbia as well as Maryland. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Our next panelist is Elizabeth Dennis, who currently works as a staff attorney at the New York Legal Assistance Group in the Tenants' Rights Unit. Prior to this, she worked at the Council of State Governments Justice Center, where she was one of 2 people that worked to create the National Inventory of Collateral Consequences of Conviction. She graduated from the University of Pittsburgh School of Law. And while she was in law school, she worked at the Parliamentarian's Office in District of Columbia. The National Law Center on Homelessness and Poverty and the Pennsylvania Institution Law Project, which focuses on rights of incarcerated people, were also organizations that Ms. Dennis worked with. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Our last panelist for today is Mariam Khan. Mariam is a graduate of American University with a Bachelor's of Arts in Justice Law and Criminology. She also attended and graduated from Elon University School of Law, where she clerked for the Legal Aid and the Humanitarian Immigration Law Clinic. Mariam passed the North Carolina bar exam in February 2019 and has actively practiced immigration law, specifically in deportation defense and asylum cases in Federal Immigration Court in San Francisco, California. Mariam has recently joined a private immigration firm in New York City. Thank you so much again for joining us, Mariam.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is awesome.
So I'm gonna get started with some questions that I'd like each panelist to answer, beginning with Ms. Vondin, which is important and is a question that we often get from our viewers, as most of our viewers on this call are either law students currently or aspiring law students that are in college. So if you could each answer, why did you want to go to law school? And if you always wanted to go to law school, because sometimes we know that there's a sudden inspiration that leads us there. Sometimes it's always been a dream. And in either path, it's okay. And if you don't know right now, that's fine too. But we want to hear from you as far as, did you always want to go to law school? And why did you want to go to law school?
So, thank you, Danielle. So it's been a long time since I came out of undergrad, and I wouldn't say that I always wanted to go to law school, but I think towards the end of high school, I started thinking about things that were either along the business lines or legal lines. And so I wouldn't say that it was always a passion or a dream of mine, but as I, matriculated throughout school, I developed an interest. I had a number of friends that were also going. But, I also thought it was aligned with the kind of background that I had in Russian studies, because I was thinking at that time more along the lines of international law.
Okay, great. And that's such an interesting area to get your degree in. Did you always want to study Russian?
No. So there's there was at the time, I assume it's still the same, a language requirement at Michigan. And so I made a choice there. It was a rewarding degree in terms of, just a broad spectrum of kind of business, economics, and things like that. And like I said, at that time, I mean, things were different. So I don't, hopefully my advice won't be outdated.
Well, thank you so much. It's so helpful. Miriam, if you want to go ahead and answer.
Okay, sorry. So I was pretty young when I came to this country, and so I kind of had to deal with immigration lawyers coming in here, and I realized that they have a lot of power and they can do a lot of good for people that need it. And I saw that there was a lot lacking as I was navigating through the immigration system, as my family was. So ever since I came to this country, I was like, I want to do that. So I graduated college a year early, and then I started law school, and that's a 2.5-year program. So I definitely finished really young. I remember not being able to have a drink during 1L year. So I definitely think that I knew from day one, and I just kind of rushed through it. I was like, this is what I want to do. And now that I've been practicing for a year, a little bit over a year, I still know that that's what my purpose is. So when you feel that in your gut, you should follow with it.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Miriam. That's a really, really good point. A lot of us share that inspiration from personal experience and going to law school. So we can definitely identify with that. Ashley, if you want to go ahead.
I would say no. I haven't always wanted to go to law school. I didn't grow up wanting to go to law school. I was one of those people who had a million different career ideas, and I would change my mind like the wind blows. And I just remember being an undergrad, and I had this professor. She was my political science professor, and I would take all of her classes. I adored this professor, and she was an attorney. And she would tell us about her cases that she was doing. And after taking all her classes and being around her for so long, I was like, okay, that's what I want to do. So, it wasn't one of those things where I did grow up wanting to do it. It was just like a spur of the moment decision that I made, I think the semester before I was supposed to graduate, honestly.
Thank you so much, Ashley. And Liz, if you could go ahead and round us out.
Okay. Yeah, I did always know. I like the idea of being a lawyer kind of being akin to word puzzles, that you're trying to solve a problem that other people may not have been able to solve. And then through college, I was involved in various forms of activism, and then that grew in law school. And the more that I've worked as an attorney and through internships dedicated solely to public service, I've I've seen that there are certain things that you're only able to do through an understanding of the law, and so it's solidified my commitment to that. But yes, for me, it was always.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Liz. As you can see, all of our panelists have different reasons for going to law school, and there's no one, particular reason that you should think you should have to go. And so I encourage each viewer to, if you're on the fence about going, or you're going, but you're not really sure, which direction, to definitely take the time and dig deep and, find out what it is that connects you to the law, or what passion can you fulfill by working through the law as well. So our next question would be for each of the panelists: how did you select your law school? As we know, there are so many law schools, out there today. There are different programs. I went to the same law school that Miriam did, which has a 2.5-year program as opposed to the 3-year program. And, that's on a newer, the newer spectrum as well for length. And so if we could hear from each of you about how you selected your particular law school. Each panelist, as well as each of the members on our team, we did not go to school in the same area in which we lived all the time. Some of us moved. How did you go about choosing the right law school for you? And Ashley, can you start us off?
Oh, okay. So it was simple as it was really close to my home. I hadn't lived far away from home. And so for me, it was the convenience of being 2 hours away. I could get right on the interstate and drive right home without any issues. So it was quite simple for me.
Okay, great. Miriam, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, so mine was pretty similar. My family is down here in North Carolina, and I saw that it was an expedited program. And again, there was nothing that was going to stop me from getting it done. I think also knowing some alumni and being from around here, I kind of got a better grasp of what Elon was about and what the law school was structured like. So if you haven't entered law school already, definitely step foot onto that campus before you make a decision, or at least know someone that has. Yeah, I think that's it.
Great. Liz, do you want to go ahead and let us know how you chose your law school?
Yeah, my family lives in Pittsburgh, so I was able to pay in state, and then how I chose between some of the universities there. I applied to all of the ones in the city and then negotiated up their scholarship offers, which I would recommend that everyone do, especially if they're in the same residential area. And then this kind of wasn't the question asked, but I also went to American as a visiting student for a little bit, and then did not take the bar exam in Pennsylvania because of the universal bar exam. So I'm also barred in DC and New York, but because of being able to waive in.
Right. And that's a good point too. Some of us, we go to school out of state, but we want to practice in other jurisdictions. And so that's definitely possible to land a job and also to become licensed in multiple states, even if you didn't attend law school there. Celeste?
Sure. I think it was different. So for me, being in an international city was very important. So I'm from Michigan. I left literally the day I graduated and moved to DC. I felt like it was, at that time, it was very important to be connected to a more metropolitan city, and where you practiced was where you worked, especially dependent upon the kind of work that you wanted to do. So for me, it was all about some of the, like maybe technology or business law, and there were a number of attorneys that were at major firms, which I didn't ultimately end up in, but were part of kind of like the GW Law alumni, and they were started in this area many years before. So that was why I chose something in this area and that particular school.
Great. So if anyone on the panel wants to answer this question, if you're unsure about which law school that you want to attend, maybe of your top 2, maybe you have a top 3, or you're looking at, geographical location for picking a law school. What advice would you give to someone who knows they want to go, they've been accepted, or if they're in the application process and they're just not sure which school to pick? Other than a scholarship or the financial aid that's being offered, what advice would you give to a student in choosing that right law school for them?
I think you have to do kind of a pros and cons list. I think that that's the best way. Have your negotiables and your non-negotiables. Like for me, I had to be close to home, but I wanted to be able to live in the city so I could do city things and go out and stuff. I wanted to be around a younger crowd. So I think if you do a pros and cons list, it'll be a little bit easier to determine what law school works for you, and go visit them. Go sit in their classes. Some professors will let you sit in the classes. Everything that looks good on the outside, sometimes if you go sit in the class, you're like, this isn't for me. The class might be too big. It might be too small. So go and visit them.
I would also add a slightly different perspective, and that is again kind of aligned to where you want to practice and what type of work you want to do. So as I mentioned, there's a huge contingency of certain types of attorneys in different places. So what I have learned over my career is that, you know, the Washington area has, I think it's #1 for technology companies outside of like Silicon Valley. So I'm a technology attorney, have been. If I wanted healthcare, I might be further south. And so I think that's what makes it difficult, because you're not always sure what you want to do. And so for me, being in a larger environment where I had a breadth of opportunities was important. So I've had a team of attorneys under me, and some went to smaller schools or in different, more what I consider regional schools. And I think if you want to stay in those communities, because you're also networking in those communities. So I think those are other factors to keep in mind.
I have two things. If you do know what area you want to specialize in, which obviously you shouldn't, there's so many things to learn, but if you do know that, finding someone at that school that really specializes in that. So University of Pittsburgh is a regional school for sure, but someone that works there is a national specialist on prison law. And so because he teaches there, I was able to write a lot of pieces that were featured in arguments that I wouldn't have been able to do even at bigger schools, just because he happened to be there, and also to get feedback on some of those things. But of course, there's no way you would know that if you weren't planning to stay there. And then also I would check about the writing programs that each school has, because that's really where you end up at the end of the day. And different schools have different types of intensive first-year writing programs. So see what feels best for you. You know, everyone has a different style, but they have a pretty comprehensive breakdown of what that looks like. And you can ask people, you know, you can talk to other students too. Do you feel like you are a better writer after your first year going into your second year? And I think that would be really helpful for people to help make decisions about.
Yeah, just echoing what Liz just said, I chose Elon partially because they had the Humanitarian Immigration Law Clinic, which is a few law schools around the country have them, but we had Professor Grant, who was this really notable intellectual woman that has experience all over the world, from Australia to over here, doing international and immigration law. So I just wanted to be under her wing, and I took that opportunity. So again, if you know what you want to do, really run with it. But if you don't, that's 100% okay, because even though I knew what I wanted to do, every single day I saw someone else and I was like, I want to do that too. So don't ever feel confined to your expectations, but also like have a vague path.
Yeah, that's great. All of those pieces of advice are really great, because I'm sure our viewers are at different stages, you know, in finding that law school that's right for them, you know, aside from the financial piece, which we all know is very, very important. Just transitioning a little bit now. So you've made it to law school, you're in law school, and you're thinking ahead. You know, you're thinking of internships, you're thinking of post-grad, first job. If you could all share what you were involved in law school that you think was helpful, in landing that first post-grad job, or any internships that you think that were helpful that you personally had, any experiences, whether it was scholastic or not, that helped you prepare for your first role? Anyone can start this one.
Okay, I'll start. I was already talking about the immigration law clinic. So we had a residency program at our law school. So I was like working as like a representative with like the third year practice certificate, going to Department of Homeland Security, like working with people. So that getting my hands really, dirty with it was one of like the biggest things that like really led me and like really identified me and distinguished me from any other law student entering immigration law, is because I kind of already had been in front of judges, been in front of immigration officers. So really look at the alternative programs your law school has, because not every law school has residency programs, but those would really distinguish you.
I'd say end every experience with a writing sample from that experience. And that was something that I had trouble asking for at first, because I felt uncomfortable. I don't know how other people feel about this, but sometimes, you feel like, okay, I'm here and I'm so grateful to be here. My goodness, thank you for letting me come work for you for free. And I love it. I'm here and I'm so psyched. But you have to end every experience with a writing sample, and ask for the writing sample. This would probably be the most valuable thing that I could, in reflecting back a few years later, could tell anyone, because ask for it early. As soon as you start, say, I'd like a writing sample. I would like it to be short or long, depending if it's your first year or it's your third year, so that you can edit it throughout. Because after your first summer, and I don't say this to pressure anyone, it's just so you can think about it now, because after your first summer, you need it for your second year. And then after your second year, you need it. And then that way, whenever you go to apply for jobs, you have a couple options. Because, I know when I was looking for jobs these last time, I sent out, my goodness, so many job applications. And, you're tweaking your resume and you're applying to so many different things. And maybe you want a sample that includes something else that you wrote. And it's just better if you have some options. And the only way that you will is if you ask people to help you get that. And they should. Honestly, you're not asking for something that isn't given to, isn't, like what you should be getting out of it. I think that's it. Sorry, I talked so much.
No, you're fine.
I think for me, while I was in law school, I went off and did my own thing rather than participating in the clubs. I remember just going to a scholarship dinner, and one of the attorneys there said the same thing. She was like, I didn't do anything that my school was involved in. So for me, I was a guardian ad litem. So I was a volunteer. I worked with children's attorneys for parents who are about to lose their children. Because for me, I wanted to do family law and domestic violence. So I would work with low-income families. I was a mentor at Faith, Hope, and Love mentoring program in Charlotte, North Carolina. I would go there once a week, and I would sit with kids who came from low-income families, broken families, and we would go through homework and stuff like that. And then on top of all of that, networking is key. I was making sure that the people that I surrounded myself with in law school, one, weren't all from the same area as I was. They didn't want to all practice in the same area. They didn't all want to live in the same area, because for me, I was like, I don't know where I'm going to end up. So it's good to have people in different places, which is essentially how I ended up with my clerkship. My significant other, he wanted to practice in Maryland. He did an internship at Prince George's County State's Attorney's Office, and one of the prosecutors there, she became a judge. And so when I was looking for a job, he put me in contact with her, and I ended up with a clerkship. And then from my clerkship, my judge, as Danielle can attest to, because she was also her law clerk, she's a busybody. So we were always networking. You were at all kinds of events all the time, meeting people. She would send you places. And essentially that's how I ended up becoming an assistant state's attorney in the same office in the exact same unit where she used to practice. So I think those are like the three key things that you should do. You don't have to always be involved with stuff for your school. Go off and do your own thing if that's who you are.
Yeah, that's great. That's a really great piece of advice because, sometimes with universities, there are limited spots on journals or teams, or maybe you're just not interested. Personally, I was never interested in a team or a journal because I knew I wanted to practice in-house and transactional. And, I'm sure as all the panelists and team members can attest to, there are not a lot of opportunities to learn about practicing in-house as a law student. That's just not the traditional track that law schools really endorse. And so that takes a little bit of creativity and learning that and then getting that skill set prior to practice. So I want to talk a little bit about your current role. So Celeste, if you could share, as you are a fellow in-house attorney, if you could share your experience in pursuing becoming an in-house attorney, if you started in-house, or if not, did you start at a law firm, and do you love in-house? Is it as fun as everyone thinks as far as work-life balance as opposed to a law firm?
Okay, so no, I didn't start in-house. I actually started out, although I mentioned to you business law and different things, one of the things I also did was I had a hodgepodge of internships, some that were paid and some that weren't. So I worked for Prince George's County Office of Law, and I ended up getting my first position at Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. And so I oversaw 2 offices. And after that, I took that experience, which was transactional experience, to an in-house position. So when I went into in-house, nobody wanted to be in-house. It wasn't, everyone wanted to go to a law firm. Many years later, I'm still in-house. I think that it's changed drastically. They were typically, you could get off at 5. I was at Nextel before it was Sprint. I was at AOL, was other like large companies. And, what I'm finding is that it is a lot of work. I wouldn't say that it's fun. I think for my personal experience is that I work at a really large company. It's over 500,000 people. There are over 2,000 attorneys. We have access to anything you want in terms of learning opportunities. So even though I have experience, I may not have ever done blockchain or something like that. So I think it just really, but it's no less work. And I think that that's what you find when people are coming from firms, that you work long hours. And also I would add that there's a skill that you develop in-house that your firm attorney, and I only know this from overseeing outside counsel, they don't always have. And so there's a different skill set that's required in addition to your technical skills, but also soft skills. And especially if you support anybody in a sales function. So
yeah,
it's a lot of work.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. And I want to stick with you for a second.
Mm-hmm.
I've talked to students before about the difference between working in-house and working at law firms, and that there is a different skill set that you have to have working in-house. And if you're transitioning from a law firm, there's a bit of a learning curve that law firm attorneys have to go through. So can you expound a little bit about what you've personally experienced that is a difference in skill set for an in-house attorney rather than a law firm attorney?
So one of the things that is really important in-house that's different from a firm attorney is, firm attorneys may be given an assignment and they may come from a variety of backgrounds, but kind of expected to develop certain kind of technical skills, or maybe they're focused in one area. And so what happens is they are doing the work and they're not necessarily serving as a business advisor. So every day, and at least my experience has been that sometimes you're negotiating internally just as much as you are externally. And sometimes the hardest clients that you have are the internal clients. because there are other considerations, obviously dollars of the company, that are of number one concern. And so so that's one thing. You have to know how, when I've interviewed or when I have been interviewed, that's the thing that they want to know is how can you balance the risks of the company? How can you not only identify them and just spit them out to the client, but help them be more of, provide strategic solutions. So it can be difficult in companies if you don't start to understand the business, because you can't provide strategic advice without knowing the business. And I'll just add one other point to this, is that usually what happens is your leadership will base your performance on that kind of strategic advice. It's not necessarily your technical skills only, I should say, but it's also how you interact with the business and how you can evolve to be more strategic for them and a solution finder.
Absolutely. And I can personally relate to that, as many decisions that I've personally had to make sometimes indicate a business interest. You have to take that into your analysis of whether or not you're going to move forward, with a lawsuit or engage in a deal with a company. You have to think of the business side as well as the legal side, and keeping those company policies in mind, in balance with our legal training. So thank you so much for expounding on that. Miriam, can you talk a little bit about what you do as an immigration attorney?
Yeah. So we kind of live and die by the INA, which is a huge statute book of Immigration Nationality Act. So basically, I'm not going to go into like the history of it, but basically I focus on asylum cases. That's probably my preference. I do affirmative and defensive asylum. So when people either overstay their visas or come here without any immigration status, they could either be picked up by authorities and then have defensive deportation proceedings, which is what I mostly do. But my preference is affirmative asylum proceedings because we have a lot more time to gather evidence. But it's a lot of paperwork. You're usually coming to court with files like this big, and then some, with a paralegal carrying behind you like this too. But like, it's really gratifying work, just being able to help also special immigrant juvenile status cases, VAWA, violence against women cases. Just the work is really hard and grueling and sometimes discouraging, just considering the state of the world we're in right now. But once you get those wins, once you see the look of relief on those people's faces, it makes it all worth it. So.
Absolutely. And that's really admirable work, that you do. You're on the front lines. This is a very hot button issue right now in our country. And I think that the importance of this area is continuing to grow. So thank you for sharing with the viewers what you do. Ashley, if you could share a little bit about being a prosecutor. Are you, what they, show us on Law and Order? Are you excited running into court every day? Can you just share a little bit about being a prosecutor?
So yes and no, it's like Law and Order. I work in the Special Victims Family Violence Unit. I prosecute domestic violence crimes. I have a few sex abuse cases. I have gun cases. I do jailable traffic offenses, and then I do other misdemeanors. So some of the stuff that you see on SVU, yes, I do deal with. When you get into the courtroom with juries, it doesn't look like it does on TV, but we deal with the same kind of incidents, if that makes sense. There are some times where the jurors come in and it's a lot more difficult to do my job because they have this idea of who I'm supposed to be or what I'm supposed to do, and I don't do it that way. And they're just like, they think that I am in the wrong because the TV is right. So, that is an issue. I spend probably 24 hours, 7 days a week doing work. it is just probably as taxing as immigration law. Especially right now during the pandemic, domestic violence has like tripled. So every day I'm getting more and more cases in. So I have no work-life balance. I work all of the time. My victims have my phone number. They call, they text. I'm in court all of the time. There are days that I don't get to eat but once a day. I'm back and forth in the office with my supervisors. I train new incoming district court attorneys in my unit. And I'm always, getting called down to the courtroom because right now in my unit, I am a senior district court attorney. So if something goes wrong in the courtroom, I'm usually getting called down to the courtroom. And if I'm not already in the courtroom, and then I get called into the well to assist. So it's a lot. It's a balancing act, but there is no work-life balance. It's just a balancing act to manage everything that I have to handle in my job.
Got it. And I appreciate you doing that, because I think, as you can experience with juries, you see Law and Order, you see How to Get Away with Murder, you see Scandal, and you think, all attorneys, prosecutors, they act like this, or defense attorneys. And that just perpetuates this unrealistic expectation on the court system and attorneys moving forward. So thank you for sharing on that. Liz, if you could share with us about your work in landlord-tenant law, as that's very important, not only in New York City, but anyone who, is currently renting or, has aspirations to do so. If you could share some tips and let us know what you do.
Sure. It's a different type of practice in that every situation is kind of a crisis. So I practice, Tracy is my colleague, and hi Tracy. We do mostly non-payments and holdover proceedings. Non-payment is exactly what it sounds like. Someone has, it's alleged that they haven't paid their rent, which could be, sometimes they haven't, but more often than not, it's a miscalculation. Sometimes Section 8 is miscredited, or another type of subsidy is miscredited. Sometimes they haven't been paying because there are, gross housing violations, just completely uninhabitable conditions. The other large bucket that things tend to fall in are holdovers, which broadly means that someone has stayed beyond the conditions of their lease. And both of those have some defenses. Holdovers have very few. And in the current conditions, things are very bad. There are little to no protections for people coming forward, and being a housing attorney right now is incredibly difficult. Generally, it's kind of wild every day. I mean, the way that landlords attorneys in particular conduct themselves, housing court is unlike any place I've ever been. It's very informal, but also there's just a lot of roughness. There's just general disrespect for our clients and for us because we've chosen to affiliate ourselves with them. But I've been doing it for this position for actually today exactly 1 year, and it's very fulfilling because I never question if I'm helping people, because the side that I'm on is quite clear. And when you have a victory, it's awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much, Liz, for that. That's really an interesting and also important area of law. A lot of people, including myself, are not always aware of the rights as tenants. When we're entering a lease, when we're negotiating maybe a lease term, or if we want to transition out of our lease to something else. That's really important. And like you mentioned, there are a number of reasons as to why people aren't able to or pay or shouldn't pay, especially if there are violations of housing, and how you should go about that, moving forward without risking your residency. So thank you for sharing that as well. If each of the panelists could share some insight with our guests about networking. So this is a big area that's very important for students, is networking with practicing attorneys. As we know, networking is huge in our careers, as we, need it for our professional networks, but also you never know who you're going to end up working with. And so it's important to maintain professional relationships with attorneys. So as law students, how would you recommend students going about connecting with attorneys, now that we're in quarantine and we're not able to have as much face to face, but even after we return to a sense of normalcy and we're able to have more of that interaction, how would you suggest that law students network now to help them increase their network for the future?
I think finding your local bar association and going to their events tab and just seeing what events they have for law students. A lot of bar associations, when you are in law school, your membership is free and you'll get to go to a lot of the events. Go to the events, take a friend. I'm one of those people who I am very shy when I'm in a new environment. And so I like to have somebody with me. So do a buddy system with networking. Your school should have events in law school. My school would send us out events and stuff that we could go to, or find stuff that you like and go to events where attorneys handle those things. So they're out there. You just have to look for them, especially with social media. You legit can probably type in a panel discussion for criminal law attorneys or whatever, and something will pop up. So they're out there. It's just all a matter of just looking.
Yeah, definitely taking advantage of the networking events at law school helped me a lot. Just walking around with my resume, like wide-eyed, expecting for an opportunity, because for every 100 things you apply for, maybe one person will respond. So you just got to keep hitting the pavement and you got to keep going. I definitely think that it's going to be harder with Corona because you leave a better impression when you're like in front of someone, shaking their hand, giving them a hard copy of your resume. But I think once things kind of bounce back to normal, I think that once, like, if you get those, like the bar association, like Ashley said, or networking events at your school, I know they seem daunting. I know these people have been probably practicing sometimes longer than you've been alive. I was one of those. I just kind of like pulled myself up by my bootstraps and just went in, and I turned out with internships. So it can't turn out poorly because they're there to help you too.
Great. If any of our panelists, if we can have one more, just kind of help shed some insight.
Yeah, I would say, so I'm going to take it a little bit further. So I was just having this discussion with my husband, who also was at a large kind of consulting like I am. And the thing is, it's not just for once you're in the career, and even before, it's not just about, to me, networking with a bar association. So one of the things I don't think I did enough of is I think I was reserved, like Ashley said. I felt kind of gun shy about doing certain things, but really developing relationships, because I think one of the things that happens, especially for women of color, it's not just the networking, because these people, you see them and then they may go. Even after practicing over 20 years, I still can benefit and do benefit from mentoring relationships. And not only do you need a mentor, you need a sponsor. And that is not the thing that people talk about. And so sometimes we don't have those same opportunities for whatever reason. And I would say, if I could do it again, probably being less gun shy, but developing relationships early. And I don't mean someone that you just see it in the association, but someone who can help you get there, because everybody, even if they've been practicing a long time, is still managing through their career. And so you want them to be able to help you and be vested in you, because just because they're 20 years out, 30 years out, doesn't mean everything's all gravy. So I would definitely do that.
On that point, I would just add one thing. I found it helpful to email professors and people that have helped me previously if I've had a successful interview or a job, and that way you can follow up. Thank you so much. This was the letter that you wrote for me was wonderful, or it didn't go well, but I really appreciate the conversation that we had. and that way you keep the information going, and you can share good information that you have with them, and it's not just a transactional relationship, or doesn't feel that way. And the farther out you get from law school, the more important that is, especially because you don't know what type of job you're going to need next, or if you want a really competitive job and they know someone who knows someone, etc. It never hurts to send that 5-minute email.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's very helpful. And I appreciate that, because that's a major concern for law students. I know it was for me before I graduated, was how am I supposed to reach these attorneys, especially as someone who wanted to practice out of state. I find myself on LinkedIn for hours and hours and hours, just searching attorneys and entertainment who were doing what I wanted to do, and just sent them a message hoping that they would respond. And most of the time they did. There's nothing to lose. You take the shot. Most of the time they're friendly and they're like, yeah, you're in law school, sure. So right now we're going to transition into our Q&A for the last few minutes of this panel, and Tracy will be facilitating that.
Yeah, hi everyone. Great advice from all the panelists today. Wish I knew it before I started. So our first question, I think Liz, you answered this, but I just wondered if you would go over it again for everyone that did not look at the chat. Someone was asking, what is a write-in sample? So could you give your answer to that?
Sure. I said it is a writing project that you do at your job or internship that can be later used to apply for other positions. It is literally a sample of your writing. And whenever I said ask for it early, by that I meant that the person supervising you would be able to edit it multiple times. And the benefit of this is both that it demonstrates your writing, but also the type of work that you've done previously.
Great. And always show up with your writing sample to the job interview. Our next question was about work-life balance. Ashley, I know you said for a DA, there is no work-life balance. So how about some of the other panelists pitch in and answer that question? Miriam, by the way, hi.
Oh, hi. So I feel like the way that the immigration system is going now, I know it's not like that for a lot of fields. So the attorney general can kind of just pick up a case and turn over the whole field in a matter of seconds, as you know from the clinic. So it can be like you could have the perfect case, and then the next day it can be completely like there's no precedence anymore. So there's not really, like, you can carve out work-life time balance, but like you're gonna have to cut into it a lot. But you have to make sure you leave a block of time for self-care, like journaling or doing something, taking a walk, like, because if you keep going in that cycle, you're gonna have a breakdown, because there's no way to like make a predictable schedule in this field, or at least in immigration law, because there's just always going to be something that pops up.
Any other panelists would like to?
Yeah, I agree. And I think one of the things that I glean from the panelists that are, that I see here is that they have a passion for what they do. And I think that's really important, because the hours are long, and it can be trying and stressful. And so, as I mentioned earlier, in-house, there isn't a lot of balance. And I think that's typically across a lot of careers. We don't really control or at least the legal career, we don't really control our schedules. And that's something I don't think I really knew.
Liz, do you want to talk about the terror of trying not to get somebody evicted?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bummer. But I guess I would stress kind of what Miriam said. And this goes into, I guess, any type of a public service field. If there are some weeks whenever I certainly work way more than I would. But if you're going to do something with your life that is really hard, and you're fighting against systems that are, you're greatly unmatched, you have to carve out time for yourself, or else you're gonna do a terrible job at it and you're not gonna be able to help anyone. So I think that the work-life balance has to be part of what you do every day, or else you're not going to be able to be effective. So maybe it's if you're me, you take a really aggressive walk around the block a couple times, and then you come back to your desk and eat the box of pastries that you bought for yourself. Or, maybe you do yoga, whatever your thing is that day, but it has to be something. Especially if you've chosen a life to do hard things. And I would recommend it. Like, I feel good most days, but I also eat a lot of pastries.
Thank you for that. I'll stop by your desk. The next question is, what is the most important skill you need to have as a law student? Anybody can go for this one.
Writing, you take it everywhere. When you file motions, for new jobs, you can't avoid it. And writing in undergrad is not law school writing. They are two completely different writings. I can't speak for everybody, but I had to completely relearn how to write because I was an English minor for a little bit. And so I went in like, oh, this is going to be a breeze. And when I got back, one of my first papers that I wrote, it wasn't. So focus on your writing. You have to focus on everything, but that is something you need to take priority in, is your writing.
Yeah, that's great. Writing. Ashley, since you're speaking, someone wants to know, what does the training look like for a DA?
The way I do my trainings is hands-on. From the moment you step in that office, you become me. So I usually start with just doing the docket prep. So basically, usually before the pandemic happened, I would have 25 trials set in the morning and 25 trials set in the afternoon. And you have to prep every single case. You have victims in every single case. You have to call them. I would make you call all your victims. You have to make sure all your motions are filed. I'd walk you through how to file your motions, what you need to put in it. You need to make sure you're reading through all your motions. So if you get in court, you know how to argue them. You have to make sure you're organized. You have to know where your case law is, tabbing books with your rules in it. You have to know the rules. You are me. I make sure when you're in court, I'll sit second chair with them. When we start our trials and we're going through the docket, if you have a question, I'm there, but majority of the time I won't say anything. You have to figure it out because I'm not going to always be there for you. So I'm very hands-on with my training, but I'm the type of learner where I have to do it hands-on. So that's how I show everybody's not like that. But just know if you train with me, I'll break you in really fast on that. You'll be for the last 2 people that I have trained, I have gotten compliments on it. So something has to be working.
We are out of time. We didn't get to all of the questions, but I'm going to throw it back over to Danielle for the sake of time.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tracy. Again, we are approaching 8 o'clock and we want to be mindful of everyone's time. I'm going to throw it over to Kirsten to close us out. But again, I just wanted to personally thank each of our panelists for your time and your advice today, as it was very, very helpful and very insightful for not only the guests, but myself as well. So Kirsten, if you could go ahead and close us out.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kirsten. I'm one of the team members of Pursuing the Esquire. And I too just want to thank the panelists again for your time and for sharing your expertise. You all share so much invaluable information, and I hope that I know that everyone benefited from it. I wanted to thank everyone that participated in the call. The fact that you guys are here is definitely an investment in your future. So simply calling in and listening is very important. And so we want to really thank you for participating in our first event. I want to encourage everyone to come out to our next event. We're having a series this entire month. And next Wednesday, same time, same place, probably different Zoom link, but you can sit wherever you'd like. we're going to have a judges panel, and that's going to be so insightful as well. You'll get to hear from judges from all different jurisdictions and their journeys to the bench. So that's something that you should really look forward to attending. And I encourage everyone to follow us on our social media platforms, visit us at our websites. We're very transparent, easy to get in touch with, and we really, really look forward to hearing from you all. So thank you so much and good night.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good night. Stay safe.
Thank you so much. Good night.
Ladies, bye.
Bye.